Something happened in my clinic 3 years ago that I have thought about nearly every week since. A patient came in for a routine follow-up. She was 67 years old, non-smoker, no family history of cancer. She exercised regularly. She ate what most people would describe as a healthy diet. Lots of home-cooked meals, lots of leftovers, because she lived alone and cooking for one meant almost everything got reheated the next day. When her blood work came back with markers that sent us down a path we had not expected, I sat with her and went through her lifestyle in detail. Everything: sleep, stress, medications, and food, specifically how she stored it, how she reheated it, and which foods appeared on her table again and again. What emerged from that conversation was not a single dramatic cause. It never is with cancer. But it was a pattern. A quiet, daily, completely unintentional pattern of reheating specific foods in ways that were generating chemical compounds inside her kitchen that she had absolutely no idea were dangerous. She looked at me when we finished and said something I will never forget. She said, "I thought I was being responsible. I thought leftovers were the healthy choice." For most foods, she was right. But for 5 specific foods, prepared and reheated in specific ways, she had been unknowingly creating conditions that increased her cellular risk every single time she opened that microwave door. I am telling you this today because nobody tells patients this at their annual physical. It does not come up. It is not on the standard checklist, and it absolutely should be. My name is Dr. Raymond Osei. I am an oncologist and preventive medicine specialist with 21 years of clinical practice. I have reviewed the research on dietary carcinogen exposure extensively, and today I am going to tell you about 5 specific foods that undergo documented chemical changes when reheated, changes that generate compounds linked in peer-reviewed research to increase cancer risk. I am going to tell you exactly why this happens at a molecular level, what the research actually says, and precisely what to do instead. This is not about fear. It is about replacing uninformed habits with informed ones. And that replacement takes about 30 seconds once you know what you are looking for. Let me start with the chemistry, because understanding it changes how seriously you take the practical advice. When food is cooked and then cooled and then reheated, it does not simply return to its original cooked state. The molecules inside it have already been altered by the first cooking. When heat is applied a second time, those already altered molecules undergo further reactions. Some of these secondary reactions produce entirely new compounds that were not present in the freshly cooked food. And some of those new compounds are what toxicologists and oncologists call genotoxic, meaning they are capable of damaging DNA. DNA damage, when it accumulates and when the body's repair mechanisms cannot keep pace with it, is the foundational mechanism of cancer development. This is not a fringe hypothesis. It is the central consensus understanding of how most cancers begin at the cellular level. The specific chemical families we are concerned about in reheated foods include heterocyclic amines, nitrosamines, lipid peroxidation products, and in one specific case a compound called acrylamide. Each of these has been studied extensively. Each has documented carcinogenic activity in laboratory models and epidemiological associations with cancer in human populations. Now let me be precise about something important before we continue. Eating a reheated food once does not give you cancer. The human body has sophisticated DNA repair mechanisms. Single exposures to low levels of genotoxic compounds are handled by these mechanisms routinely. What we are talking about is cumulative exposure. Daily habits repeated over months and years. The slow accumulation of molecular damage in cells that are particularly vulnerable. The lining of the stomach, the colon, the liver, the pancreas. The patient I told you about at the beginning was not poisoning herself with a single meal. She was applying small, repeated cumulative chemical stress to her cells over years. And that is exactly the kind of exposure that matters most in cancer development, and exactly the kind that dietary awareness can prevent. Here are the 5 foods. Food number 1. Reheated cooking oils and foods cooked in oil. This is the most chemically significant entry on this list, and it is the one most people have never considered. When vegetable and seed oils are heated, they undergo a process called lipid oxidation. The polyunsaturated fatty acids in the oil, the very component that makes many cooking oils seem healthy, are chemically unstable at high temperatures. When they are heated, they form compounds called aldehydes, specifically a group called lipid peroxidation aldehydes, including compounds with names like 4-hydroxynonenal, abbreviated 4-HNE, and malondialdehyde. These compounds are genotoxic. They react with DNA directly. They also react with proteins and cell membranes in ways that disrupt normal cellular function. The research linking chronic aldehyde exposure from oxidized cooking oils to cancer risk, particularly colorectal, liver, and pancreatic cancers, has been building in the scientific literature for over 2 decades. Here is where reheating becomes the critical issue. When oil is heated the first time during cooking, some oxidation occurs. When food cooked in that oil, or the oil itself, is heated a second time, the oxidation products that formed during the first heating undergo further reactions. generating additional aldehydes and other degradation products at levels significantly higher than first-time cooking. A study from the University of the Basque Country measured aldehydes, concentrations in oils heated multiple times, and found that reheated oils produced aldehyde levels many times higher than fresh oil heated once. The researchers specifically noted that reheating vegetable oils repeatedly, which is standard practice in many restaurant deep fryers but also common in home cooking when oil is saved and reused, generates concentrations of toxic aldehydes that represent a meaningful health concern. The practical application here is twofold. First, never reuse cooking oil that has already been heated. When oil has been used to fry or sauté, discard what remains rather than saving it. Second, when reheating foods that were originally cooked in oil, such as fried chicken, stir-fried vegetables, or sautéed dishes, avoid the stovetop and microwave methods that add additional high heat. If you must reheat these foods, do so at the lowest temperature that makes the food safe to eat, and consume them as quickly as possible rather than reheating repeatedly. The oils most vulnerable to this oxidation process are those highest in polyunsaturated fats: sunflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil, and generic vegetable oil. Oils higher in monounsaturated fats, like olive oil and avocado oil, are more chemically stable under heat, but still should not be reheated repeatedly. Food number 2. Reheated rice. This one surprises virtually everyone. Rice is bland. Rice is simple. Rice is simple. Rice feels like the safest, most neutral food in the kitchen. And yet improperly stored and reheated rice is associated with a bacterial toxin exposure that has direct links to gastrointestinal cellular damage, and it carries a specific chemical risk from a compound called arsenic. Let me address both. The bacterial issue first. Rice, particularly when cooked in bulk and left at room temperature for any period before storage, can harbor Bacillus cereus, a spore-forming bacterium. Unlike most foodborne bacteria, Bacillus cereus produces toxins that are not destroyed by reheating. The heat kills the bacteria, but the toxins remain fully active. These toxins cause direct cellular injury to the gastrointestinal lining, and with repeated exposure over time, contribute to the kind of chronic mucosal inflammation that is recognized as a precursor state for gastrointestinal cancers. But the arsenic issue is the less discussed and more significant long-term concern for seniors specifically. Rice is a uniquely efficient accumulator of inorganic arsenic from soil and water. Inorganic arsenic is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning there is sufficient evidence of its carcinogenicity in humans. It is associated specifically with cancers of the bladder, lung, and skin, and with increased risk of kidney and liver cancers. When cooked rice is cooled and then reheated, particularly in a microwave, the reheating process alters the starch structure of the rice in ways that appear to increase the bioavailability of any arsenic present, meaning your body absorbs more of it from reheated rice than from freshly cooked rice. A study published in the journal Science of the Total Environment examined this specific question and found measurable differences in arsenic bioaccessibility between freshly cooked and reheated rice. The practical guidance here is specific. Cook rice fresh when possible, rather than relying heavily on reheated batches. When you do cook rice in advance, cool it rapidly, within 1 hour, and store it in the refrigerator immediately. Never leave cooked rice at room temperature for extended periods. When reheating, add a small amount of water to create steam and heat to a full internal temperature rather than just warming the surface. And consider rinsing rice thoroughly before cooking, which removes a portion of surface arsenic before the cooking process begins. Food number 3, reheated spinach and other nitrate-rich vegetables. Here is one of the most profound ironies in nutritional medicine. In my previous discussion on blood pressure, I explained that nitrates in spinach and leafy greens are converted in the body to nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels and reduces blood pressure. That is true, and spinach is a genuinely powerful cardiovascular food when consumed fresh or freshly cooked. But when spinach is reheated, something different happens. The nitrates in spinach, under the influence of heat applied a second time, are converted not to nitric oxide but to nitrites. And nitrites, particularly in the acidic environment of the stomach, react with proteins and amino acids to form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most potent chemical carcinogens identified in food science. They are specifically associated with cancers of the stomach, esophagus, and colon. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified multiple specific nitrosamines as probable or possible human carcinogens, and the stomach cancer connection is particularly well established. Countries and populations with historically high intakes of nitrosamine-containing foods consistently show elevated stomach cancer rates in epidemiological studies. The nitrate-to-nitrite conversion in reheated spinach is not theoretical. It is a documented chemical reaction. A study examining nitrite formation in reheated leafy vegetables found that spinach, lettuce, and chard all showed significant increases in nitrite concentration after reheating, with spinach showing among the highest conversion rates of any tested vegetable. The specific conditions that accelerate this conversion are repeated reheating and slow reheating. A low oven or a prolonged microwave cycle is more problematic than a brief high-temperature reheat. But the safest approach is simply to cook spinach and other nitrate-rich vegetables fresh at each meal, rather than in large batches intended for reheating. If you regularly cook a large batch of sautéed spinach and reheat portions throughout the week, this is the habit I am specifically asking you to reconsider. The blood pressure benefit of fresh spinach is genuine and worth preserving. The nitrosamine risk of repeatedly reheated spinach is equally genuine and worth eliminating. Other vegetables in this category that should not be reheated repeatedly include beets, celery, lettuce, and radishes. All are high in dietary nitrates. All undergo the same nitrate to nitrite conversion under repeated heat exposure. Food number 4. Reheated processed and cured meats. I want to be direct with you about this one. The cancer risk associated with processed meats, meaning bacon, ham, sausage, hot dogs, deli meats, and similar products, is not a new or controversial finding. The World Health Organization classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens in 2015, placing them in the same category as tobacco and asbestos in terms of the certainty of the evidence, though not in terms of the magnitude of risk. The primary mechanism is nitrosamine formation from the sodium nitrite used as a preservative in these products. But reheating dramatically amplifies this risk, and this is the part most people have never been told. When processed meats are cooked the first time, some nitrosamine formation occurs, particularly at high cooking temperatures. But the nitrite content of the meat at that point has already been partially depleted. When the meat is reheated, particularly in a microwave or on a hot pan, the residual nitrites undergo a second round of nitrosamine-generating reactions in the presence of the meat proteins. The total nitrosamine content of reheated processed meat is substantially higher than that of freshly cooked processed meat at equivalent serving sizes. A study published in the journal Food Chemistry measured N-nitrosodimethylamine, one of the most studied dietary nitrosamines, in processed meats before and after reheating. The reheated sample showed nitrosamine levels significantly above the freshly cooked baseline, and in microwave reheating specifically, the localized high temperatures created in certain areas of the meat produced particularly elevated concentrations. The practical recommendation here has 2 levels. First, and most important, limiting overall consumption of processed and cured meats is the primary protective step. The WHO recommendation aligns with most national cancer prevention guidelines in suggesting processed meat consumption be kept minimal. Second, if processed meats are consumed, eat them freshly prepared rather than reheated. The incremental risk added by reheating is meaningful and entirely avoidable. For seniors who eat bacon or sausage as a regular breakfast item and routinely reheat leftovers from the previous morning's cooking, this is a specific and actionable change. Cook only what you will eat immediately. Do not store and reheat. Food number 5. Reheated eggs. Eggs are extraordinary nutritional packages. High-quality protein, essential fatty acids, choline critical for neurological health, and a range of vitamins and minerals. For seniors specifically, eggs are often one of the most accessible and affordable high-quality protein sources available. But eggs have a specific protein chemistry that makes reheating genuinely problematic from a cancer risk perspective. Egg whites contain high concentrations of proteins called albumins. When these proteins are heated during the first cooking, they denature. They unfold from their natural configuration and form new bonds. This is what makes a fried egg white turn from translucent to opaque. But when denatured egg proteins are heated a second time, particularly at high temperatures, they undergo further chemical reactions that generate a class of compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGs. AGs are formed when proteins and sugars react under heat, a process called the Maillard reaction in glycation. In the body, AG accumulation is associated with inflammation, oxidative stress, and cellular damage. The link between high dietary AG intake and cancer risk, particularly pancreatic cancer and certain gastrointestinal cancers, has been the subject of increasing research attention. A study published in Carcinogenesis found that high AG consumption was associated with significantly elevated pancreatic cancer risk in a large prospective cohort. Eggs generate AGs during the first cooking. Reheating them, especially in a microwave where localized temperatures can become extremely high, generates additional AG formation in the already denatured proteins at a rate that exceeds what occurs during fresh cooking. There is also a practical food safety dimension. Reheated eggs, particularly scrambled eggs that have been stored at room temperature or improperly cooled, can harbor bacterial growth in ways that hard-boiled eggs with intact shells do not. Salmonella and other pathogens associated with egg products survive inadequate reheating temperatures and cause gastrointestinal inflammation that, with repeated exposure, contributes to mucosal cellular stress. The guidance here is simple. Cook eggs fresh. They take 3 minutes to scramble and 5 minutes to fry. Of all the foods on this list, eggs are the one where the fresh preparation alternative is so fast and so easy that the case for reheating them is genuinely difficult to justify. If you regularly make a large batch of scrambled eggs on Sunday and microwave portions throughout the week, I am asking you specifically to reconsider that habit. The nutritional value of eggs is best preserved, and the chemical risk is entirely eliminated by cooking them fresh at the time of eating. Now let me bring this together practically, because I am aware that some of what I have described today may intersect with deeply ingrained daily habits. And habits change most successfully when they are replaced with specific alternatives, rather than simply abandoned. For reheated cooking oils and oil-cooked foods, the replacement habit is cooking smaller portions, fresh more frequently, rather than making large oil-cooked batches, intended for multiple reheating cycles. For rice, the replacement is rapid cooling and proper refrigeration, never leaving cooked rice at room temperature, and cooking smaller quantities more frequently when possible. For spinach and nitrate-rich vegetables, the replacement is cooking individual portions fresh rather than preparing large weekly batches. A handful of fresh spinach takes 90 seconds to wilt in a pan. That 90 seconds eliminates the risk entirely. For processed meats, the replacement is eating them freshly prepared in small quantities and reducing overall frequency. This is the one where the primary protective factor is limitation of consumption itself, not just preparation method. And for eggs, the replacement is simply making them fresh, every time. None of these replacements requires more money. Some of them require slightly more time. But when I think about my patient who sat across from me and said she wished she had known, when I think about the simplicity of the changes that might have shifted her daily chemical exposure over the years before that appointment, the investment of a few additional minutes in the kitchen seems like the most straightforward trade in medicine. The science behind food and cancer risk is not simple. No single food causes cancer, and no single dietary change prevents it. But cumulative daily exposure to genotoxic compounds generated by reheating specific foods is a modifiable risk factor. It is one you can act on starting with your very next meal. And in preventive oncology, modifiable risk factors that require no prescription, no procedure, and no significant cost are among the most valuable tools we have. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 surprised you the most? And if someone you know relies heavily on leftovers and reheated meals, please share this with them today. Your daily habits are writing instructions to your cells. Make sure they are the instructions you actually intend to send.